Hello! I thought I would come on here and talk a little bit about darts. I had one question about the dart technique I used in one of the reels that I posted, and that kind of led to more questions, and so I said I'd make a reel about it so I can talk about darts. I'm going to turn the camera around and show you all the different ways you can do darts. I'll show you how I sew down my darts. So we're pretending this is, this could be a skirt seam, this could be a top seam, it doesn't really matter, but this is where the dart is. And this piece, sorry, it's really hard to film with the camera right in front of me. This piece is the bottom piece. So we're gonna put right sides together, and I'll line up my bottom, and I'm just gonna have an arbitrary 5/8 seam allowance. So I'm gonna sew, kind of hard to see, I'm gonna sew all the way up to this pink line of stitching right here. Let's see if I can move the camera a little bit. Oh, you can see. So the needle, yeah, you can kind of see there. The needle is right at that pink line of stitching where I sewed the dart together. So I'm going to do a few back stitches, and then I'm going to pick up, whoa, oh, there we go, sorry. So I'm going to lower my foot, hold down my reverse, do a back stitch or two, and then just pick up and look and make sure I'm pretty close to it. Now I'm going to raise my needle, lift my foot up, kind of pull the thread out a little bit. You'll trim this all off later. And there's a few ways you can do it. You can like mark your seam allowance right here so you know exactly where you need to go. Oh, and I do have a pin. Hold please. So if we're just pretending we're gonna do this, get out of there. So there's my seam allowance, this purple line. And now I'm just gonna lift it up and follow it back to here. So I'm gonna sink my needle right at that point, right there, and then do a few back stitches and then continue on. And I'll show you where that gets us. And you wanna be careful at this point not to move your fabric. Theoretically, you will have pinned all through here. I don't need to do it for this, but if there was any gathering or something, you would definitely want to have your pins in it. So for this, let's see if you can see. I'm gonna use my hand wheel on my machine, and I'm gonna manually sink my needle right where that dot is. That way I know it's exactly where I want it to go. You could do that on the other side, like you could start on this side and sink your needle. It depends on how perfect it needs to be and what the garment is. So I'm gonna do 2 stitches forward, 2 stitches backwards, and I went over a little bit. Be sure not to catch the dart because that kind of defeats the whole purpose. Okay, and then we're gonna sew to the end. I don't know why I'm reversing, it's just a habit. Okay, clip my thread. I'm gonna move this camera back. Sorry, bear with me here. Okay, I guess that's fine. Just gonna get these threads out of the way. So now we have our seam allowance down here, sewn up to the dart leg. I had white thread in my bobbin and I didn't want to change it, but I have pink thread in the top so you can see it. And then here, there's that tiny little gap, which I don't think for this it'll matter, but you know, if you were sewing with a delicate fabric, or it just kind of depends, it's up to your discretion. If it were me, I would go back and make sure that that was right on there, but you'll see when we flip it over, it doesn't really matter and nobody's ever gonna notice. I should also say you would have pressed your dart to one side or the other when you did this. I did not because I put my iron away. So here's your seam. You can't even tell that there is a tiny little gap there. I have to like really pull to see the gap. And then on the back side, you have this beautiful little dart that just kind of floats and has its own life. And I'll show you how we can finish this dart off on the inside of your garment, depending on what kind of garment it is. This video came about because someone had a question about how I finish my darts when I leave them floating like this and don't sew them down onto the seam. So there's a few different ways you can do it. The first way is you could just leave it as it is. This is a nice finished dart. It's sewn at the waistband or whatever side seam it is. You don't actually have to do anything with this. Even if you're not lining your garment, you can just leave it as is and it's totally fine. However, if you wanted to finish it, I'm going to show you a few ways that you can. The first way would be with a lining. So pretend this is my lining piece. It's the same kind of dart. You would just press this dart to one side, and then you would press this dart to the opposite side. That way you don't get a ton of extra bulk. So this dart is going to the left, this one is pressed to the right, and then you just line it up, line up the seam allowances right here, and then, you know, depending on whatever kind of lining you're doing, you would fold it under and sew it down by hand. You could tuck it up, but that's just going to make more bulk with this part and this part of the dart. So I don't think I'd do that, but you could. Something like that, and sew it down. Lots of different options. So for the lining, and again, you could cut it. It doesn't matter because it's hidden inside the lining. No one will ever see it. If it's a super bulky dart, like this one was, let me see if I can find the little piece that went with it. Sorry, bear with me here. Oh, here it is. So this dart right here, you can see that's the other half of it. This was a really bulky dart, and I probably wouldn't leave all of this in my seam allowance. It's just a lot of extra fabric that you don't need. So I would definitely cut it. And here I just use pinking shears. You could just use scissors and slash it open. I don't have a sample. Let's see, you can do this. Let's see. I mean, you could just cut it open like that one, assuming it's that big dart, just to reduce some of the bulk. So here I've used pinking shears. Again, you could leave it like this. The pinking shears, it cuts it on the bias, so it helps the fabric to not unravel as quickly. That's why I've done all these edges, just make it's fun and it looks nice. Okay, the next option, if you want to get really fancy, you could sew it down with a herringbone stitch. It's also called a catch stitch sometimes. This I wouldn't, this really depends on what the garment is. So as you can see, I've used green thread just so you can really see the stitch. And if you look on the right side, you can barely tell where I've stitched it down. If you were doing this for real, you would absolutely use a matching thread. And if it's a really fine fabric like a silk or a satin or something, you would see those stitches. So I would not do this technique with a single layer of a fine fabric, because it would really show. With cotton or linen or even denim, well, denim, I wouldn't do it with denim. Cotton or linen, you could do this. It would be totally fine, a nice finish. This would be if you didn't want to line it. You could also use pinking shears on this edge, so it has that nice edge, and then catch stitch it down, or use the herringbone stitch, catch stitch, same thing. You could do that. What you could do, so assuming this is, say, let's pretend it's a wedding dress, and you have your fashion fabric layer, which is this purple, then you had what's called an inner lining, and that is sometimes silk organza or even cotton muslin, just a fabric to kind of help beef up the main fabric. You would have the inner lining and this purple fabric like as one, it would be one piece. And then when you went to sew the dart, you would sew them together, slash them open. So use your imagination, because I didn't prep that sample. And I could do another video on that if there is a request for it. So pretend this purple fabric and there's a layer of organza. You could sew this dart just down to the layer of organza. You'd never see it on the front. It would finish off the dart nicely. That would probably be the scenario in which I would use this stitch on a fine fabric. It just really controls the dart, but this stitch is also, it's really flexible and movable. Like it's not a rigid stitch. The fabric has movement still. The stitch has some movement. It's just a nice option. So I think I covered like the main 3 ways you would do it. You can do something fancy like this. You can just use pinking shears if you're not going to line it, or just to reduce bulk, or you can just line it and then it doesn't matter, and you just sew the dart same way, just like that. Push the darts to the wrong side and line it, and then you wouldn't see it, and there's not too much bulk because those darts are going the other way. I think that's all I have for this video. If you have any more specific questions, please comment and ask. I love answering sewing questions. Sorry, my son's playing baseball in the background. Yes, please comment with any questions. If I missed anything, please let me know. And if you have other sewing questions, please feel free to comment. happy to share what I know. It's super fun for me. Anyway, thanks you guys.